The most beautiful crime I ever committed, Flambeau used to say in his morally mature years, was, by a strange coincidence, also my last. It happened around Christmas time. As an artist, I always took care to design crimes suited to the season or the scenery I found myself in. I would position the disaster on this or that terrace or garden, as if selecting a setting for a sculpture group. For instance, landowners should be defrauded in long oak-panelled halls, whereas Jews should find themselves unexpectedly penniless amidst the lights and curtains of Café Riche. In England, if I wished to deprive a dean of his wealth, which is not as easy as one might think, I would want it to take place among green lawns and grey cathedral towers. Likewise in France, when I managed to get money from a rich and ill-natured peasant, which is nearly impossible, it pleased me to see his angry face rise against the backdrop of the grey line of felled poplar trees, and the sombre Gallic plains dominated by the noble spirit of millet. My final crime was a Christmas crime, cheerful, warm, and of a distinctly English middle-class flavour. It was a crime worthy of Charles Dickens. I committed it in a good, old-fashioned middle-class home near Putney, a house with a crescent-shaped driveway wide enough for carriages to turn around, a house with a stable beside it, a house with a name on the gate, and a monkey puzzle tree in the garden. Enough said. You can imagine the type. I believe my imitation of the Dickensian style was both elegant and literary. It is almost sad that I repented on the very same night. Flambeau would then begin telling the story from the inside. And even from within, it was strange. From the outside, it was utterly incomprehensible. And a stranger must judge the story from that perspective. Seen from that angle, the tale begins when the front door of the house with the stable opens onto the garden with the monkey puzzle tree, and a young woman steps outside to feed the birds, on the afternoon of Boxing Day, the day after Christmas. The young woman had brave brown eyes and a beautiful face, but it was hard to form an opinion about her figure, as she was so wrapped up in brown furs that it was impossible to tell where the fur ended and the hair began. Without her attractive face, one might have mistaken her for a small walking bear cub. The winter afternoon was blushing into evening, casting a reddish light on the flowerless beds, as if filling them with the ghosts of dead roses. On one side of the house stood the stable. On the other, a laurel-lined path led to the larger back garden. The young woman, for the 4th or 5th time that day, as the dog kept eating it, scattered bread for the birds, then quietly walked down the laurel path into the dim evergreen grove. There, whether genuinely surprised or merely by habit, she gasped and looked up at the top of the garden wall, where she saw a rather odd figure sitting awkwardly. "Please don't jump, Mr. Crook," she said, a little concerned. "It's quite high up there." Perched atop the wall, as if astride an invisible horse, sat a tall, angular young man with bristly dark hair. He had intelligent, even noble, features, but his complexion was pale, and there was something vaguely foreign about him. His pallor was emphasised by the only piece of clothing he seemed to care about, an aggressively red tie. Perhaps it was symbolic. Ignoring the young woman's worried warning, the young man leapt down like a grasshopper, a fall that could have easily broken his legs. "I think I was born to be a thief," he said calmly, "and if I hadn't been born next door, I probably would have become one. But I don't see anything wrong with that." "How can you say such things?" the girl protested. "Well, if you're born on the wrong side of a wall, what's so wrong about climbing over it?" the young man replied. "I never know what you're going to say or do next," the girl said. "Most of the time neither do I," Mr. Crook answered. "But right now, I'm on the right side." "And which side is the right side of the wall?" the young woman asked with a smile. "Whichever side you're on," said the young man named Crook. As they walked together down the laurel path toward the front garden, they heard a car horn honk 3 times. Then a sleek, pale green car appeared like a bird and stopped at the front entrance, engine still running. "Well, well," said the young man with the red tie. "This fellow was definitely born on the right side. I didn't know your Santa Claus was so modern, Miss Adams." "Oh, that's my godfather, Sir Leopold Fisher. He comes every Boxing Day." After a brief but noticeable pause, perhaps out of faint reluctance, Ruby Adams added, "He's a very good man." Journalist John Crook knew about the famous city financier, and the fact that Sir Leopold didn't know about Crook was entirely Sir Leopold's fault, because rather sharp articles had been written about him in magazines like the Clarion and the New Age. But Crook said nothing and silently watched the car being unloaded. The process took quite a while. From the front, a large, neat chauffeur in a green uniform stepped out. From the back, a small, tidy valet in grey stepped down. Together, they escorted Sir Leopold to the car door and began unwrapping him, slowly and carefully, like a package. Blankets enough to stock a fare, furs, seemingly from all the animals in the forest, and scarves in every colour of the rainbow were removed one by one. At last, something resembling a human being emerged. An elderly man with a grey goatee, a cheerful smile, a friendly but foreign appearance. He rubbed his large fur gloves together to warm up. Even before this whole transformation was complete, the double doors of the veranda had opened, and the young woman's father, Colonel Adams, had stepped outside to welcome his distinguished guest. The colonel was tall, sunburnt, and rather silent. He wore a red smoking cap, like a fez, giving him the look of a British pasha or general from Egypt. Beside him was his brother-in-law, James Blount, recently arrived from Canada, a big, noisy farmer with a yellow beard. With them stood a seemingly minor figure, a priest from the nearby Catholic church. The colonel's late wife had been Catholic, and as often happens in such cases, the children were raised in her faith. Everything about the priest was ordinary, even his name, Brown. Nevertheless, the colonel had always found something friendly in him, and often invited him to such family gatherings. The spacious entrance hall of the house was large enough even for the removal of Sir Leopold's many coats. The veranda and the foyer together formed a room disproportionately large compared to the rest of the house, extending from the front door to the base of the staircase. In front of the large fireplace of the drawing room where the colonel's sword was hanging, the unwrapping process was finally completed, and the entire group, including the grim-faced Crook, was introduced to Sir Leopold Fisher. But the esteemed financier still seemed to be tangled in his overlapping garments, and eventually drew a black, oval-shaped box from the innermost pocket of his evening coat. With a radiant expression, he announced that it was his Christmas gift for his goddaughter. His obvious and flamboyant pride was somehow disarmingly sincere and left people defenceless. He held out the box in front of everyone. It opened at a touch and dazzled the eyes. It was as though a crystal fountain had suddenly burst forth. In its orange velvet cradle lay 3 white and brilliant diamonds, side by side like eggs, igniting the air around them. Fisher watched with genuine satisfaction as Ruby gasped in surprise and delight, as the colonel expressed his stern admiration and thanks, and as the group murmured in amazement. "I'd better put these away now, my dear," said Fisher, placing the box into the tail pocket of his coat. "I had to be careful during the journey. These are the 3 great African diamonds known as the Flying Stars. They've been stolen so many times that the name stuck. All the great criminals are after them. But even ordinary men on the street or in hotels would have trouble keeping their hands off them. I could have lost them on the way here, quite easily. And that would have been only natural, I think," muttered the man with the red tie. "I wouldn't blame anyone for reaching out. If people are asking for bread, and you don't give them even a stone, it makes sense they might take that stone for themselves. I wish you wouldn't speak like that, the girl said, her face glowing oddly. You started talking this way after you became one of those horrible, whatever they are. You know what I mean. The ones who want to hug chimney sweeps. A saint, said Father Brown. I suppose, said Sir Leopold with a mocking smile. Ruby means to say he's a socialist. A radical isn't someone who lives on beets, Crook snapped impatiently, and a conservative isn't someone who hoards jam. Likewise, a socialist isn't someone who wants to spend social evenings with chimney sweeps. A socialist is someone who wants all chimneys cleaned, and all chimney sweeps paid for it. But he won't let you, the priest said softly. Have a chimney of your own. Crook glanced at him with interest, perhaps even with respect. Do people really want to have a chimney of their own? He asked. They might, said Brown thoughtfully. I've heard gardeners say so. And once, when a magician failed to appear, I cheered up 6 disappointed children using nothing but soot, externally applied. Oh, you must do it for this crowd too, cried Ruby excitedly. The burly Canadian, Mr. Blount, applauded loudly, while the baffled financier muttered in protest. At that moment, there was a knock at the double front doors. The priest opened them, revealing the front garden bathed in a purple sunset, darkening ever so slightly among the evergreen trees and the monkey puzzle tree. The scene was so vividly coloured and strange, it resembled a stage set, momentarily making them forget the unimpressive figure standing at the door. A dusty, worn-looking man in a shabby jacket, clearly just a foot messenger. Is there a Mr. Blount here? He asked, hesitantly offering a letter. Mr. Blount jolted, immediately halting his enthusiastic applause. As he opened the envelope, an expression of surprise crossed his face. It darkened slightly, then lit up again as he turned to his host, the Colonel. I'm terribly sorry to impose, Colonel, he said in his hearty, colonial manner. But would it disturb you if an old acquaintance dropped by tonight on business? The visitor, as it happens, is the famous French acrobat and comic Florian. I met him years ago out west. He's French-Canadian, and apparently he has business with me, though I've no idea what. Of course, said the Colonel casually. My dear fellow, your friend is more than welcome. I'm sure he'll bring some colour to the evening. He'll paint our faces if that's what you mean, laughed Blount. Might black someone's eye too. I don't mind. I'm not a delicate soul. I love those old slapstick pantomimes where someone sits on a hat. Just not my hat, please, said Sir Leopold Fisher sternly. All right, said Crook offhandedly. Let's not argue. There are worse jokes than sitting on a top hat. Undoubtedly you've found one, said the financier with dry authority, visibly displeased by Flambeau's socialist opinions and his evident closeness with his goddaughter. And what might that be? Having the top hat sit on you, said the socialist. Oh, come now, said the Canadian farmer with boisterous good cheer. Let's not spoil a jolly evening. I propose we put on some sort of entertainment tonight. Even if it's not face painting or hat sitting, something like it. Why not a proper old English pantomime, clown, Columbine and all? I saw one when I was 12, before I left England, and it burned into my brain like a torch. I came back last year and found they were all gone. Now it's nothing but weepy fairy plays. I want policemen being turned into sausages, not princesses preaching moral lessons by moonlight. Give me Bluebeard, and preferably when he turns into pantaloons. I'm all for turning the police into sausages, said John Crook. That's a better definition of socialism than some I've heard. But isn't it too much work to set up a stage? Not at all, shouted Blount, caught up in his own enthusiasm. There are 2 reasons to do a harlequinade. First, it can be completely improvised. Second, we can use things from around the house for props, a table, towel rack, or laundry basket. "That's true," said Crook, nodding eagerly and darting around. "But I suppose I don't have a policeman's uniform. Haven't killed one recently." Blount frowned thoughtfully for a moment, then slapped his leg. "Got it," he exclaimed. "I've got Florian's address. He knows all the costume shops in London. I'll ask him to bring a police uniform when he comes." And he rushed off to make the call. "Oh, this is wonderful, Godfather," cried Ruby, twirling with delight. "I'll be Columbine, and you'll be Pantaloon." The millionaire stood like a statue, with a kind of pagan gravity. "I think, my dear," he said, "you'll have to find someone else to be Pantaloon." "I'll be Pantaloon if you like," said Colonel Adams, removing his cigar for the first and last time that evening. "You deserve a statue," shouted the Canadian, returning joyfully from the telephone. "Everyone's got their role now. Mr. Crook will be the clown. He's a journalist. He knows all the old jokes. I'll be Harlequin. All you need is long legs and the ability to jump. Florian just called. He's bringing the police costume and changing into it on the way. We'll perform in the big hall here, with the audience sitting in rows on the wide staircase opposite. The double front doors will be our backdrop. When closed, they'll show an English interior. When open, a moonlit garden. It'll all work like magic." And taking a billiard chalk from his pocket, he drew a line on the floor between the door and the staircase to mark the stage boundary. How such a ridiculous affair was arranged in such a short time remained a mystery. But where there is youth in a house, that mysterious mix of carelessness and determination always finds a way. And that night, though not everyone could sense it, youth was ablaze in that home. As always, such middle-class inventions, born from the dullness of ordinary rules, grew wilder and wilder. Columbine looked charming in a flared skirt that oddly resembled a large lampshade from the drawing-room. The clown and Pantaloon had covered themselves in white flour borrowed from the cook and brightened their faces with rouge, courtesy of another servant, a true Christian whose name is unknown. Harlequin was wrapped in silver paper made from cigar boxes and had to be restrained from breaking the Victorian chandeliers to decorate his costume with crystals. Truly, had Ruby not found her old faux jewels from a costume ball where she had played the Diamond Queen, he might have done it. Ruby's uncle, James Blount, was nearly beside himself with excitement. He had become a schoolboy again. Unexpectedly, he placed a paper donkey head on Father Brown's head. The priest endured it patiently and even found a way to wiggle the ears. He even tried to pin a donkey tail to Sir Leopold Fisher's coat-tails. That was not well received. "My uncle's being ridiculous," said Ruby seriously, as she fastened a string of fake sausages over Crook's shoulders. "Why is he acting so crazy?" "Because he's the Harlequin to your Columbine," replied Crook. "I'm just the clown who tells old jokes." "I wish you were the Harlequin," said Ruby, letting the sausages swing, though Father Brown knew every detail of what was happening backstage, and even got applause by turning a pillow into a pantomime baby. He quietly slipped to the front and sat among the audience with the serious face of a child at his first matinee. The audience was small, relatives, a few local friends, and the household staff. Sir Leopold sat in the front row. His fur-collared bulk almost completely blocked the view of the small priest behind him. But artistic authorities still argue over how much the priest truly missed. The pantomime was completely chaotic, but not without merit. There was a kind of mad energy, especially in the improvisations from Clown Crook. Usually a clever man, Crook seemed that night to be touched with something like divine madness, an insanity wiser than the world, the kind that strikes a young man when he sees a particular expression on a particular face for just a moment. He was supposedly the clown, but in truth he was almost everything: the writer, if there was one, the prompter, the set designer, the stagehand, and most of all, the orchestra. During this excessive display, he would suddenly leap to the piano in full costume and bang out absurd yet perfectly fitting popular tunes. The high point of the chaos came when the double doors at the back of the stage suddenly swung open. The moonlit garden was revealed in all its glory, but more striking still was the professional guest himself, the great Florian, now dressed as a policeman. The clown at the piano began playing the police chorus from The Pirates of Penzance, but the great comedian's every move was so masterful, so perfectly timed, that the audience's applause drowned out the music. Harlequin jumped on him and tapped his helmet. The clown played, "Where did you get that hat?" Florian turned around, mimicking surprise with great success. Harlequin tapped again. The pianist offered a few notes from Then We Had Another One. Then Harlequin ran straight into the policeman's arms and fell on him, sending the audience into peals of laughter. The strange actor then performed his famous dead fall, still remembered around Putney. It was almost unbelievable how limp and lifeless a man could look. Harlequin tossed him like a sack, spun him like an Indian club, or flung him across the room. Wild comic music from the piano accompanied it all. When Harlequin lifted him off the ground, the clown played, "I arise from dreams of thee." When he dragged him by the shoulders, "With my bundle on my shoulder," was heard. And when Harlequin finally dropped the policeman with a convincing crash, the mad pianist shifted to a tune echoing the old rhyme. "I sent a letter to my love, and on the way I dropped it." At the height of this mental anarchy, Father Brown's view was completely blocked, because the city millionaire stood up abruptly, stuffing his hands into all his pockets with agitation. Then he sat down again, still fidgeting with his pockets, before standing once more. For a moment it seemed he might actually leap onto the stage. He shot a furious glance at the clown on the piano, then turned and silently left the room. Father Brown watched a few more minutes of the amateur Harlequin's absurd but skillful dance with his apparently unconscious opponent. The rough but impressive artistry continued until Harlequin slowly danced into the moonlit stillness of the garden. His silver paper costume, which had looked garish under stage lights, became enchantingly silver in the moonlight as he moved. As the audience erupted in applause for the finale, Father Brown felt a touch on his arm and was quietly invited to the Colonel's study. He followed with growing suspicion, which was not eased by the scene that met him in the study, a strange mixture of gravity and comedy. There sat Colonel Adams, still in his pantaloon outfit, with a baleen bow bobbing on his forehead. But his old eyes were sorrowful enough to make even a comedy seem serious. Sir Leopold Fisher stood by the fireplace, gasping with nervous urgency. "This is a very sad business, Father Brown," said the Colonel. "The truth is, those diamonds we all saw this afternoon appear to have gone missing from my friend's coat pocket. And you—" "And I," Father Brown interrupted with a broad smile, "was sitting right behind him." "That is not to be implied," said Colonel Adams firmly, casting a sharp look at Fisher, though it suggested such an implication had already been made. "I only ask for the kind of assistance any gentleman might offer." "You mean to empty my pockets?" said Father Brown, and immediately began doing so. He produced 7 shillings and 6pence, a return railway ticket, a small silver crucifix, a little prayer book, and a chocolate bar. The Colonel gazed at him long and hard, then said, "You know, I'd rather see inside your mind than your pockets. I know my daughter belongs to your faith. Well, recently—" He paused. "Recently," burst out old Fisher, "your daughter has welcomed into her father's house a criminal socialist who openly says that anything owned by the rich can be stolen. And here's the result. The rich man is here, but no longer rich." "If you want to see inside my head," said Father Brown, wearily, "you're welcome. Decide for yourself what it's worth. But the first thing I find there is this. The man who plans to steal diamonds doesn't talk about socialism. On the contrary, he added modestly, he usually insults it. The other two stiffened suddenly. The priest continued, You see, we know these people to some extent. That socialist wouldn't steal a diamond any more than he'd steal a pyramid. We must focus on the one person we know almost nothing about. The man playing the policeman, Florian. I wonder exactly where he is right now. The man dressed as Pantaloon sprang up and rushed from the room. There was a short pause. During it, the millionaire looked at the priest and the priest looked at his prayer book. Then Pantaloon returned and said with solemn emphasis, The policeman is still lying on the stage. The curtain has gone up and down 6 times. But he's still there. Father Brown dropped his book and stared blankly ahead as if his mind had collapsed. Then, slowly, a light began to grow in his eyes, and he asked a question that at first seemed irrelevant. Forgive me, Colonel, but when did your wife die? My wife, said the bewildered soldier. This year, 2 months ago, her brother James arrived a week too late to see her. The little priest jumped like a startled rabbit. Come! He cried with sudden energy. We must attend to that policeman, now! They hurried toward the stage, brushing past Columbine and the clown, and arrived at the now curtained platform. Father Brown leaned over the body of the comic policeman. Chloroform, he said, rising again. I just guessed it a moment ago. A silence fell. Then the colonel slowly said, Please explain seriously what you mean by that. Father Brown suddenly burst into laughter, then stopped himself. But throughout the rest of his explanation, he struggled to suppress a chuckle. Gentlemen, he said, breathless, we haven't much time. I must chase the criminal. But that great French actor, the master of comic death scenes, the corpse being tossed around by Harlequin, that man was... His voice caught again. Turning his back to them, he rushed off. Who was he? Asked Fisher anxiously. A real policeman, said Father Brown, and dashed into the dark. At the far end of the garden were ditches and arbours. Even in the middle of winter, the laurels and other evergreens displayed warm Mediterranean tones against the navy sky and silver moonlight. The joyous green of the waving laurels, the deep purples of night and the moon, a giant crystal in the sky, created a scene almost unreal. And there, among the tallest branches of the garden trees, a strange figure was climbing. Not romantic, but simply improbable. He sparkled from head to toe, as if wrapped in 10 million moonbeams. The real moon caught on him in shifting angles, lighting him up anew with every move. He leapt from a short tree to a taller, more tangled one, and paused only when a shadowy figure beneath called up to him. Well, Flambeau, said the voice, you really do look like a flying star. But that always means, in the end, a falling star. The silver figure above leaned forward with confident ease, listening to the small man below. This is the best thing you've done yet, Flambeau. It was clever to come from Canada, likely with your Paris ticket, a week after Miss Adams died. No one had the energy to ask questions. Even smarter to find out about Fisher's visit and the flying stars in advance. But what you did afterward, that goes beyond clever. It's genius. Stealing the diamonds was child's play for you. You could have done it in 100 ways. Even by pretending to pin a paper donkey tail to Fisher's coat. But afterward, you outdid yourself. The silver figure among the green branches swayed, as if startled. But the voice below continued. Yes, I know it all. The pantomime wasn't just silly entertainment. It had a double purpose. You were going to steal the diamonds quietly, but your accomplice warned you a capable policeman was on to you and would be at the party that night. An ordinary thief would have fled. But you're a poet. You already had the idea of hiding the diamonds among the fake jewels of the stage. Then you thought, if Harlequin is your costume, then having a policeman appear on stage would seem perfectly normal. That respectable police officer stepped out of the Putney station and walked into the strangest trap the world has seen. When the front doors opened, he walked straight onto a Christmas pantomime stage. He was knocked down, drugged, and thrown around by Harlequin, while Putney's most respectable people roared with laughter. Oh, you'll never top this. And now, by the way, you'd better return the diamonds. The branch where the sparkling figure perched rustled slightly, as if in confusion. But the voice persisted. I want you to return them, Flambeau. And I want you to leave this life behind. You still have youth, honour, and humour in you. But those don't last long in this trade. People can stay on one level in goodness, but no one stays level in evil. That path always slopes downward. A kind man drinks and becomes cruel. An honest man commits murder and begins to lie. I've seen many start like you, cheerful robbers of the rich, but they ended in swamps. Maurice Bloom began as an idealistic anarchist, friend of the poor. He became a sneaky informant, used and despised by both sides. Harry Burke founded the movement for a moneyless society. Now he mooches whiskey and soda off his half-starved sister. Lord Amber once dabbled in wild circles out of knightly enthusiasm. Now he pays off London's dirtiest blackmailers. Captain Barillon, he was before your time, a gentleman criminal of sorts. He died in an asylum, shrieking in fear of the very spies and fences he once worked with. Yes, Flambeau, the freedom of the forest may seem inviting. You could vanish into it like a monkey in seconds. But one day, Flambeau, you'll be an old grey monkey. You'll sit in your free forest, your heart cold, death close, and the treetops empty above you. Everything was still. It was as if the little man below held the one above by an invisible string. He spoke again. Your descent has begun. You used to pride yourself on not doing petty things, but tonight, you did something petty. You threw suspicion on an innocent youth. You've driven a wedge between him and the woman he loves, who also loves him. And you'll do worse before you die. 3 bright diamonds fell from the tree to the grass. The little man stooped to collect them, and when he looked up again, the cage of green leaves no longer held its silver bird. The return of the diamonds, discovered by accident by Father Brown, brought the evening to a jubilant close, and Sir Leopold, in high spirits, said to the priest, My views may be broader, but I do respect those who renounce the world in ignorance for the sake of their faith.